Hi, everybody. I'm Rainbow, and welcome to Dimensional Walking. Today, I'm going to do a video on the black-eyed kids, black-eyed women, black-eyed men, or men in black. They're also called Becks, Beks. And David Weatherly had done a book on specific stories on black-eyed children. And the reason why I thought I would do this today is because of my recent experience that I had while Michael and I were coming back home from doing errands. And if you didn't see the last video, I'll tell you the story kind of, and there's something else adding to that as well. So we were coming back from doing errands. It was during the daylight, and Michael stopped in front of a home that he thought there was a dog out in the road. And this is a beautiful area. We have gorgeous valleys on either side and the Douglas fir trees and pasture land. I mean, you just you name it, it looks like it's somewhere in paradise. It's so gorgeous. And this house is really a nice home. But as he stopped the car, kind of to make sure he didn't hit anything, he, as he's looking around for the dog, I turned to my right and I'm looking at a woman with her back to me, and she turns around in a real creepy way. And she's looking at me, and she's got a hat on, and she's got pigtails. She's dressed kind of strange, even for here. And she's looking at me, and her eyes were black, and she had a very ominous look to her. She wasn't pleased when she turned around and was looking at me. And I don't know if she thought maybe Michael was thinking of turning into her driveway or her where she lives, or if I was going to roll my window down and say something to her, but I just turned and I'm telling Michael to please hurry up and go, and he thought I was side seat driving. We got into a little tiff, actually. But anyways, I explained it to him. He totally understood. So 2 days later, I'm getting ready for bed, and we have 2 floors. So I was heading out the door of the bottom area, and I have to go out this door to go outside. And there's somebody right by the front entrance of where the barn is. And we live right next to the barn, like connected to it. And so I'm all panicky because it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, what the heck? Who would be out there at 11 o'clock at night? It was kind of a dead silent evening. So it wasn't like there was a large group of people. Now, we do have neighbors next door, and they did have family, but they only had small children that were with them. So, whoever this was, I got the impression they had sneakers on or they had shoes on, and they turned around, did about face, and walked towards the neighbors to their area. And what happened was when I walked out and got startled because I could hear them, and they were just like probably within 10 feet of me. I didn't want to turn and look and see who it was. I wanted just to get back into the house and lock the door. So I did that. I called Michael. He comes out. We look around and we can hear movement. I could hear movement in a pasture to the left of us, and and Michael saw somebody in front of us towards the neighbor's yard. So eventually, what happened is that they have this bright light by their barn, and whoever this was ran by that bright light, and you could see this person running. And Michael said they ran really funny. So, anyways, the next day, the neighbors were contacted, and they said they had no teenagers or anybody like that at the house. And what was interesting about it was that the neighbor got all freaked out. He said he's going to put more surveillance cameras out. He's going to do all kinds of stuff. So since that time, and it's been about 5 days or so, we haven't had any more experiences. But I remember commenting to Michael that I was very concerned about that lady knowing where we lived. Even though she was in the same vicinity of where we live, I didn't want her really knowing where we were located. So, could that have been that woman? Could it have been a black-eyed kid or teenager or someone, an adult? We don't know. But that's what made me think about doing this video today because I wanted to just find out other stories of black-eyed kids and even black-eyed women and men. And so I came up with some stories that I found online that I thought I would read to you. Now, some of them aren't like some people write and they forget the ands and the does and whatever. So sometimes I goof up stuff when I read it because I don't add that in. I just copied it off from what I had found. And I thought that today would be an interesting day of me actually talking about black-eyed kids, reading stories other people had experienced with black-eyed kids. Now, I gotta say, what I experienced was pretty scary. And I got the impression that whoever this was just wanted me to know they were there. Do the black-eyed kids do that? I know they walk up to the door and they knock. They peer in windows and do stuff like that. And he could have been peering in the window. And I say he because that's the impression I got. So now I close the drapes and all of that because, especially at night, I had them semi-open, but now they're closed because I just don't want anybody peeking in on me. But anyways, that was our story. So let's find out some of the other stories that I found on the internet. This story goes like this. In the snowy town within the middle of nowhere of Vermont, an elderly couple heard the sound of three loud knocks on their door. Opened the door and saw two children, a boy and a girl. Parents will be here soon. May we come in? The children did not make eye contact and just stood there in the doorway. The elderly couple were hesitant, but after a while, they let the boy and girl inside. The kids settled on the couch while the wife made some hot cocoa and the husband asked them questions that went unanswered. The wife returned and noticed that her cat was scared and angry with the children. May we please use the restroom? They asked. The wife looked at the kids and she finally saw them. The children's eyes were as black as a starless universe. She directed them to the bathroom and returned to her husband, who was covering his face with his hand. Did you see their eyes? The husband then showed her his hand full of blood from a nosebleed. The power suddenly went out and the house turned as dark as the kids' eyes. The wife headed to the restroom and was confronted by the voice of the kids at the end of the hall uttering, Our parents are here. The kids then exited the house, leaving the door wide open. The wife then noticed that there were two men at the end of the driveway. The men were very tall and slender. The wife waved, but did not receive the same friendly gesture. The two men and children then drove away together in one car. The power then came back on a little later after the kids left. Throughout the next week, weird things happened in the house. 3 out of 4 cats went missing, and the fourth had been found dead in the pool of its blood. The husband continued to have nosebleeds and finally went to the doctor, where he was diagnosed with a very aggressive skin cancer. This legend even crossed bodies of water and landed in the great land of the UK, where in 2014 the Daily Star wrote 3 front-page stories about sightings of the black-eyed children in the haunted pub in Staffordshire. Ghost hunters who believed that the black-eyed children were extraterrestrials, vampires, or ghosts took these alleged sightings very seriously. Nowadays, people still claim to see the black-eyed children when driving late at night down an empty road or the side of their window late at night, or even lurking in the shadows of their room. Many people have reported seeing the black-eyed children standing in the corner of their room during their episodes of sleep paralysis, or even waking up in the middle of the night because they sensed someone was watching them in the shadows, which happened to be children. Another person said, I ran across a pair of kids in Louisiana close to the swamps that had solid eyes. I kept telling myself that they had colored contacts in. They were around 10 or 12 years old. They gave me the creeps. They seemed to have no emotions, never smiled nor frowned. It was at a gas station that I had pulled over to check my map. I didn't realize how late it was until my co-pilot asked me who would let their little kids run around 2 in the morning. We locked the doors and left as quickly as we could. I swear, when I looked in the rearview mirror, those two children were standing in the middle of the road staring at us. I never drove through Louisiana again without the doors locked, windows up, and not stopping while it was dark. Another instance. It was almost like it felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog, Lucy, barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter, staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there, rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided that the best bet would be to open the door and show her nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared. And I figured it would work with a puppy too. I opened the door and she raced to the front door. She stood there, snarling at the door, with an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and opened the baby gate, blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped towards me. When I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid and backing down. As her mannerisms changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were two kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger than, but I'm 21 and she looked to be 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde, and she wore it long, about mid back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin looking olive colored pullover style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be around 3 or 4, in the same style of jeans and a button down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair, tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm, and it was identical to one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot cocoa to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators I was at the door. The older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly, and she said, "Our mother is worried." So, interesting. It doesn't say anything more than that. I'm assuming she didn't open the door. Let's hope not. Here's another story. As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, oh, excuse me, this is the continuation of it. As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things, as a staunch atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I had written off many ghost stories from friends and family members eager to tell their tale. I didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize in my own way. I couldn't rationalize out of it. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed kid. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently, I backed away from the door. Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. Just let us in to use your phone. I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite. When I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. We're not going to hurt you. We, if we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone? Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backwards, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back towards the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got in my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading them all about Becks that you can't just let them come in. They can't come in without your permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear that I will be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it, but this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, this tells me otherwise. And rightly so, because remember, you don't want to invite them in. Whenever people invite them in, whether it's children inviting them into cars or people inviting them in because they think they're children, bad things happen after you invite them in. So that can make them a little bit more like vampires because they can't come in unless you allow it. They have to have your permission, and think about that. That's interesting. What do vampires do? Vampires have to have permission as well. That's interesting. I've always wondered about that. What it is it about our permission that allows these creatures to come in? Tell me what you think. Let's get to our next story. I was riding the bus back home after work. It was about 1 a.m. I'm a security guard and often work odd hours. So I'm sitting here and this guy gets on, sits across from me. He's wearing a suit and a briefcase and was a regular looking guy in his 20s. What struck me about him at first was that he was chewing a cigar, not smoking it. You can't smoke on the bus. So I was just looking at him while he stared out the window and chewed his cigar. And all of a sudden, he turned and looked at me. His eyes were pitch black, just as you would describe a dark eyed person. My heart started beating like a mad mother blankety blank, and I felt my heart start to rise in panic. And not only was I starting to panic, I had no idea why. I was just terrified of this guy. Then he grinned at me, and his teeth were all covered in tobacco bits and brown juice. The cigar clamped between them. I almost screamed, but instead I had the presence of mind to just get up and take the seat right behind the driver. I calmed down a bit after that, but I kept an eye on the guy. He ended up chatting with some girl that got on, and they were still talking when I got off. I later convinced myself he was just trolling me, having fun with a pair of contacts. Now I wonder. So there you go. There's a few stories of people who've experienced black-eyed kids coming to their door, and as this guy seeing somebody come up on the bus. And I've heard from a friend of Michael's and mine that they dealt with someone who was a black-eyed adult, not child, but adult, that had black eyes when they got into the bus. So uh, maybe there's more stories of people encountering black-eyed people on buses than we realize. But today's stories and the reason for today's video is just to not to frighten anybody in having you think that these things are going to come to your door. Just be aware that they're out there. Now, I knew this house that Michael and I drive by all the time was a little odd. But now I just can't look at it in the same manner anymore. I guess that's the whole point about black-eyed children, black-eyed adults. It's the fact that you're dealing with something that is either an energy vampire, is cousin to a vampire, something that is extraterrestrial, which some people believe, or something just dark, the darkness, the paranormal has always hidden that is now come out and isn't hiding anymore. So let me know what your thoughts are below and comment in if you've had a black-eyed child or adult story. And I know there's a lot of people who think they're connected to the men in black and the women in black. And it could be. Maybe they're a hybrid and maybe they're a mix between some alien group and humans because they look very human. They don't act human and they have a different energy than humans. They just look human. And so tell me what your thoughts are. So thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your subscriptions. We greatly appreciate that. And I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.